Mr. Pratam Singh, as leader of the opposition, says that the Workers' Party does not take a position on the matter. Thus, as a party, the Workers' Party has no official position. It does not support the repeal of 377A. It doesn't quite oppose either. It also does not support the constitutional amendments to protect marriage. From their speeches, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lim, for example, support the repeal. And while Mr. Singh supports the constitutional amendments, Ms. Lim and Ms. Heytingru do not support the constitutional amendments. Mr. Dennis Tan and Mr. Gerald Giam are against the repeal, but support the constitutional amendments. Mr. Leon Pereira is for the repeal somewhat more enthusiastically than his leader, and as for the constitutional amendments, he takes a divergent position from his chairman, Ms. Lim. So the Workers' Party had a debate among themselves. They debated and discussed, but didn't decide on a party position. And so the question is, if this is how one decides, how will such a team function if they are in charge? Mr. Singh said his lifting the whip on Workers' Party MPs was democratic, so as to allow for a full and honest representation of all views. That explanation is factually untrue. Every MP must know that. So it does no credit to this House to say these things. The Workers' Party MPs could have made all the speeches they made, even with the whip in place. MPs are always entitled to state their honest views. They can agree, they can disagree, they can say what they think. You can express your views, whatever they are, without having to lift the whip. I repeat that. The whip does not and has not prevented MPs from speaking their minds. MPs have always been free to express what their constituents think. The whip is relevant for voting, not speaking, and the whip sets out the party's position. In moving the bills, Minister Masagos and I took pains to lay out both sides of the issue. The PAP MPs speaking on the issue too have reflected the concerns, the fears and pain of the many individuals they have spoken with. These include views of Singaporeans from different religious groups, LGBT groups, and others. So do not be mistaken. Views on all sides can and have been and must be fully ventilated, and they have been ventilated by PAP MPs. As I said earlier, the whip is imposed to set out the party's position as a whole. In our Westminster parliamentary system, parties must have a view on important questions that come before Parliament. They need to be honest in this House, say what they think is good for Singapore, and be accountable to the electorate for their decisions. The real point is that the WP as a party does not want to take a stand on this matter. It does not want to be seen as supporting the repeal. At the same time, it also does not want to be seen as opposing the repeal. That way, it hopes to be all things to all men and not too much of anything to anyone. Members may know the second line was said in respect of a well-known person. In my remarks yesterday, I reminded members there are two reasons for repealing Section 377A. First, it is the right thing to do, because there are no public concerns that justify private consensual sex between men being a crime. Some disagree with that. They think that the law should be retained as a matter of conscience. I mentioned yesterday that I accept that. We understand and respect these views. These are seriously held views by honest, sincere people, including in this House. They have thought about it, have decided that for reasons of conscience and often of personal faith, they cannot agree to the repeal. But I also outlined a second reason to repeal Section 377A. the significant legal risk of it being struck down by the courts if we were to leave 377A alone, and the significant negative and disruptive consequences for Singaporeans and Singapore if that were to happen. That is a policy question, a question that requires us to consider what is in Singapore's interests. From the debate, the following points are clear and are not in question, and the WP does not question them. 1, 377A is at risk of being struck out for being unconstitutional. 2, if 377A is struck out, then there is a further risk that the definition of marriage could be challenged as well. 3, and that then means that there are risks that our housing, education, media content policies, and multiple other policies could all be challenged. No one has questioned these risks in this House. The WP understands this. There are 4 lawyers among them in this House, including Ms. Lim, who has agreed that the legal risks to 377A exist. Given that, then what does the WP as a party propose? If you don't want to repeal 377A and also do not want to support strengthening marriage, which we have proposed, the position with 377A is like a train approaching. The question is whether we have the courage to act or rather dive for cover to protect yourself and leave society to face the train wreck. I emphasized this quite strongly yesterday. Given the risks, we have a responsibility to do our duty as parliamentarians, to take a position, to deal squarely with the problem and not abdicate our duty. To say the party has no position allows the WP MPs to make speeches supporting all sides without having to make a decision and be held responsible for that decision. That's not true democracy. It is better described as wanting to speak without taking responsibility. In the context of our debate, their position will mean that they will leave the decision to the courts and let Singaporeans face the negative consequences, including perpetuating differences and polarizing our society further. If we leave this matter to the courts, because the courts can only make binary decisions, as we have seen happen elsewhere. And if the WP truly believes that these sensitive matters ought to be decided by the court, never mind the consequences, including further dividing us in endless rounds of litigation, then they should be honest and say so in this House. The only reason we can have a decision in Parliament is because the PAP has its whip in place. When you stand up and speak at length about the pain and suffering of the LGBT community, then I think one can ask, why don't you take a clear stand and support the repeal? Or if you believe otherwise, take a stand, oppose the repeal as a party. As I say this, sir, let me tell members, the issue of conscience, which is real, is quite different from the issue of policy. I have focused on the policy issue, and I think it is not too much to ask that a clear stand be taken on policy issues. Let me end by quoting Winston Churchill. They are decided only to be undecided, resolved only to be irresolute. So this government has consulted widely and has come to a position. We believe that our policy offers a way forward. It balances the different views, maintains our social cohesion, keeps us together. The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Wong have stated clearly that they will maintain this position. On this difficult matter, we will do our duty and take responsibility for holding society together. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.